Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm going to be taking you through step by step how to create your own colour swatching sheet for your particular colour palette. So I produced a video a couple of weeks ago discussing how important it is to have some form of colour mixing chart or colour mixing circle in your sketchbook. How important it is to be able to refer to that when you're painting. It's really useful to know what colours you have in your individual palette and how to mix them to create that perfect colour that you're after for your painting. So I have created a chart and I've added it to my video below as a PDF, so you can download it and print it at home if you want to use mine. Obviously, if you have different colours to me, you can replace these with your own colours. I produced something very similar to this for my newsletter subscribers a year ago, I think it was now, and I just used a few of the colours that I use on a regular basis. However, since then I've added to my colour palette and I wanted to produce another one that has all of the colours in my regular everyday colour palette so that I can easily refer to this when I'm painting and when I'm teaching. So I'll just go over the colours that I'm going to use today. We've got quinacridone magenta, permanent rose, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, then we've got quinacridone gold, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, Payne's grey, sap green and green gold. And I've arranged them on my chart in their colours, if you like. So all my reds and my pinks will be in this left segment, then we go into yellows, then into browns, blues, and then finally into greens. So hopefully that's going to work out really well. So all you're going to need is to download my PDF document, click the link below, print it at home. I've printed it onto a piece of card because my printer won't allow me to print onto watercolour paper because it's too thick, but a piece of card is absolutely fine, and then I've stuck it down to a board to prevent it from cockling or buckling while I'm painting on it. That's always a good idea when you're doing a watercolour painting, just to prevent that from happening and stops you getting in a bit of a mess. Obviously you're going to need all your colours that you use on a regular basis, and you can make that decision as to how many you want to use. I've got my regular 2 pots of water, one for mixing my colours so that it keeps nice and clean and we don't get any muddy colours being produced, and also one for cleaning my brush. I'm using really small squares, these are, so it's about 1.75 cm by just over 1 centimetre deep, so they're really tiny areas to fill in. So I'm using my number 2 round brush, so hopefully that will be fine. Got a bit of a paper towel to clean my brushes on, and a scrap of watercolour paper just to test out before I go ahead and put it onto my chart, just to make sure I'm happy with it. And yeah, so let's get started. So I'm going to work quite methodically across this. I'm going to start in the top corner, and the first colour is quinacridone magenta, and actually the corresponding colour down the side is the same. It's quinacridone magenta because that's the first colour on my list. And you'll see that as we go across, I will work across the chart in this way. So first of all, I put down my quinacridone magenta. The second box, I will mix the magenta with my permanent rose, and then the third box I'll mix the magenta with the crimson, etc, etc, and then we'll just move down the colours in the same way. So I will do a few of these just to show you, and then I'll speed the video up so you haven't got to sit and watch half an hour of me filling out this board. It actually might be longer than half an hour because there's quite a lot of squares and quite a lot of mixing to do. So I'm going to find my quinacridone magenta in my palette, which is this one here. So because it's not being mixed with anything, I can just simply take some from there. I've got a tiny bit of water on the brush, and I know that I can fill out this top left hand square with that colour. Okay, so this is where it's time consuming because obviously it's a tiny little square and I have a bit of a tremor and it's not the best when coming to fill out a delicate little square with very straight edges. So mine might not quite be as neat as yours, but you take your time. Now the second one along is the magenta mixed with a little of the permanent rose. Now it's not going to change much because obviously permanent rose is a very similar colour. So just going into my permanent rose here, just activate it a little bit in my palette, mix that in with the magenta, and I'm going to have a little look at what that does. Tiny little patch there on my little sheet here, and I'm going to actually come across. It's very, very similar. There's a slight change in colour. Maybe go a bit stronger with the permanent rose, tiny bit. Okay, there we go. So, and you fill in the next square. So all you've got to do is make sure that when you're coming up to the previous colour that it's not absolutely soaking wet, because your new colour will of course want to bleed into that. So because I'm painting just onto ordinary white card, excuse my phone, let me put it on the silent, that's something I should have done a minute ago. There we go, it's on silent now. So yes, so just be careful when you come to place your next colour, make sure that that has dried so that they don't run together and it'll spoil that mix. So the next one along is the alizarin crimson. So again, start off with the magenta on my palette. Let's bring this across so you can see it clearly. So there's my magenta, I'm cleaning off my brush, and this is my crimson over here. So I just want to activate that crimson, get a good amount on there, mix it in with the magenta, testing it out on here. And I think because the crimson is such a strong colour, I'm going to go in with a bit more of the magenta. There we go, yes, that's better. And then colour in, or paint in should I say, paint in that next square. So these first few colours are all going to be really, really similar. It's when we come to start mixing with the other colours, for example the blues and the browns, you'll start to see a real difference. But because of course we're starting with all the reds, they're all going to be pretty similar colours. So just bear with it, keep going. So the next one is cadmium red. So I'm going to get a clean spot on my palette here with the magenta, and then into my cadmium red, which is over here on my palette. Just mix some of that up, add it to the magenta that I just placed down. Maybe a touch more magenta. There we go. And I'm happy, yes, I'm happy with that one. The first colour that I mixed was much more powerful. The cadmium red was changing it too much. So really, ideally you want a 50-50 mix with the two colours that you're using, and that will give you the best result. But of course some colours are stronger in relation to other colours. So for example, when I come across and start mixing with the yellows, then obviously the magenta is going to be much stronger than the yellow. So I'm only going to use a little of the magenta in relation to the yellow when I come to mix it. So the next one along, quinacridone gold. So I'm going to get a bit of my magenta on a clean spot on my palette. Just remember which spot you're working on at the time. It might be a good idea to remove your previous mix, that would work, so to prevent you from mixing into that one, and because you won't get obviously a good result if you start mixing in the wrong place. So that's my quinacridone gold and the magenta mixed together, and that gives a gorgeous rich colour. And you're going to work your way along in this exact same way. You're going to have some squares that are the one colour alone, so that it won't be mixed. For example, when we come to do down here the cadmium red, as we get across and we hit cadmium red on the top, then obviously that square there is just going to be pure cadmium red, and you'll find that actually it goes along in a diagonal. So there we've got the top left is quinacridone magenta, the next one along is permanent rose, then you'll have crimson, cadmium red, quinacridone gold, cadmium yellow, etc, etc, and it'll work its way down in a perfect diagonal, and you know that those are just the colours individually on the palette without mixing with anything else. So I'm going to speed up the video now and show you at the end the finished result. So just a quick note before I carry on, these 4 colours that I have in my palette here, I can use those to start filling in down the left hand side, because effectively there are 2 squares on the chart with magenta and quinacridone gold. There's the quinacridone gold down the left, there's the magenta on the top, so that colour corresponds to that square. The cadmium red and the magenta would go in here, the crimson and magenta would go in here, and the permanent rose and magenta would go in here. So you can fill out 2 squares at the same time rather than mixing over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to water them down further on this side of the chart. So they're nice and strong across the top and on this right hand side, but the lower section and the left, I'm going to water them down a little bit. So it gives me an idea of the colours that they would be stronger and also more diluted. So there's the quinacridone magenta with the permanent rose. That is a more sort of concentrated mix, this is a more diluted mix, and I'm going to do the same thing, clean bit of water. So the next one was the crimson mix, which is this one here on my palette. So I'm just going to dilute it with some clean water. Each time just remember you must clean your brush thoroughly, otherwise it's going to affect the colour. As you can appreciate it, especially with the diluted versions, a little bit of another colour in there will change it quite a lot. So the next one down is the cadmium red and the magenta, which is this one here. So just add a touch more water. And I'm cleaning my brush each time, and then finally the other one that I previously mixed was the quinacridone gold and the magenta. So just a little more water. So from now on my chart, I will be filling out 2 squares at once. I will be filling out the one section going from left to right in a more concentrated mix, and then from top to bottom I'll be, like I say, I'll be diluting it down with more water just to show me the difference on my chart. So let's carry on and speed things up for you guys. Welcome back. As you can see, I've spent actually the last hour and a half completing my colour mixing chart. It took a lot longer than expected, but colour mixing, you know, it is a time consuming thing, and there are a lot of colour mixes across this chart here. I thought I'd quickly show you the original colour mixing chart I did a couple of years ago, and I actually applied this to my newsletter for subscribers to download, but it really didn't have all the mixes on it that I wanted, so I've added my extra colours from my palette, and now I'm really happy that I've got those colour variations here, and I've also got the less saturated mixes and the real sort of opaque mixes of the colours as well, so I can see the both in the one chart. So this has been really successful. It's really nice to point out that burnt sienna and ultramarine blue make a beautiful sort of a black colour. So if you are somebody who doesn't like to use black, you can mix one of your own with variations within it, which is really nice. So burnt sienna and ultramarine blue created that colour. I also really liked the quinacridone gold and the ultramarine blue. It makes a really nice deep sort of forest green, so that was lovely. And we got some really nice neutrals with the Payne's grey mixed with the other colours in my palette. Yeah, so I'm really happy with that. Hopefully that is useful to you guys. So it's not an important thing to do, but it's a very helpful thing and useful thing to do with your own particular colour palette, and you might be surprised at what colours you can create with those. So if you've enjoyed my video, as always, give it a thumbs up, a like, and if you think you've learned something and you'd like to see more of my videos in the future, then click the subscribe button and you'll get a little notification every time I upload a new painting video for you. I hope you guys have a great week. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.